A big hello and a very warm welcome to the WPP and ET Now BrandZ CEO Roundtable. I'm Sonali Krishna and I'm very glad to be joined by an illustrious panel to discuss and debate the brand challenges that surround us today in the new world we live in. The theme for today's discussion is Opportunity Trust. The genesis of the theme Opportunity Trust comes from the fact that in the yesteryears, trust was something that brands could take for granted. And in today's day and age, this is something brands have to meticulously work on. The fact that we live in a world which suffers from a serious trust deficit is of course not aiding any matter. Recent phenomena such as, allegations against PSU banks, reliability and authenticity being questioned by new age e-commerce brands, and of course the advent of fake news. All these factors have adversely impacted the trust sentiment of the economy. So the big question is, how do brand builders today ensure that their brands and their companies are viewed and perceived as trustworthy? And to discuss, debate and delve deeper into this subject, I'm joined by a very elite panel. So without further ado, let me introduce my very illustrious panel. On my left, I have Uday Shankar, CEO Star India, Sandeep Kohli, Executive Director Personal Care, Hindustan Unilever, Eric Salama, CEO Kantar Global. On my right, I have Anurag Mehrotra, Managing Director Ford India, Sandeep Kaul, CEO Tobacco Division ITC, and of course, David Roth, the CEO, the store WPP. Thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen. Truly a pleasure. Let me first come to you, Uday, and talk to you about the fact that while I have, made a sweeping statement, there is a trust deficit in this country. Let me establish that with the panelists here. So I'll start with you and ask you do you think today brands, firstly, suffer of a trust deficit? Is trust an automatic?
No, you cannot assume trust to be automatic and you cannot take it for granted. Look, we live in a world where there is continuous spotlight on everybody. Traditionally, spotlights were held in few hands, not just in this country but everywhere. Today, everyone, because of social media, because of mobile phone, because of awareness, education, everybody can shine a spotlight on you and judge you and then put out a verdict against you or for you in the public domain. So we have to be careful. We are being continuously judged. And that is why a lot more cases of either brand deficit or whatever you call it are coming up. If you falter, then there is somebody who's going to notice it and highlight it. And that's exactly how it should be.
Let me just, bring you in, Eric, at this point in time. And, it would be nice, you heard Uday and he's set the context. Would you say that this is, solely an India issue, that we have, we don't have our shining knights in armors, showing us that corporate India can be, that the corporate world could be, great and trustworthy, or do you think this is a global issue?
Well, I think there's a global issue in terms of elites being disconnected from society and the people as a whole, and those elites can be corporate elites, they can be political elites, they can be all kinds of elites. So I think the world has got an issue of elites being disconnected from really the people that they're there to serve. But I think to Uday's point, it's important to also remember that there are lots of companies in India and elsewhere who earn the trust of their customers day by day. And if I look at the data that we have, Indian companies do as well as companies elsewhere in the world in terms of earning the trust of their customers. And if I just go back 2 years, we had one of the biggest issues in India that we had anywhere in the world with the noodle problems the Maggi noodles. And if I look at where that company now stands and what Nestle have done about it, they were transparent, they were open, they talked to their customers, and the trust levels that they've got are as high now as they were pre-scandal. So they've regained all of that trust through the actions that they've taken. So I'm optimistic where companies take it seriously.
Right. Good point, Eric. Let me just come to this side of the panel. So, Anurag, I'll start with you. Would you say the markers of trust have changed or broadly, fundamentally remain the same?
I think if you look at specifically for the automotive category, which I can talk about, what's fascinating for us is that it is the second most expensive thing you buy in your life. Probably third if you're funding your marriage, but the second most expensive thing. And there is not even a single automotive brand in the top 50 ET most trusted brand list, which is a I mean, you can be despondent about it or look at it as a phenomenal opportunity for a brand. And we believe the ability to earn the trust of the customer could be through size, like you mentioned, which is you're a dominant market share player, or it could be through relationships, right? You look at your average kirana wala today, he has phenomenal amount of trust with the average household, and he does it through remembering your name. He knows exactly what you want to buy. He'll always do what's in your interest.
Tell me how different as a a personal care marketer and who's had several decades of experience. How different is life today for you when it comes to especially trust when you have two sets of customers? One is, let's say, your middle-aged customer and one is your young millennial customer. Is catering to both of them actually the same? Do we make too much out of it, or are they starkly different?
Do brands need to gain trust differently,
Sure.
depending on the type of person you're speaking to? Yes, of course, because the way you speak to the people, or how you speak to the people, or where you speak to the people will change. So the brand say and the brand do have to be similar. Now with that brand, the way I speak to different segments of consumers could be different. And that's where I see the big opportunity now, because especially with the coming of, let's say, the digital age, to loosely put it, I can actually now talk to different people in different ways, based on targeting them differently, so that they can empathize with me more. So actually, I see a huge opportunity now of building greater trust for my brand, because now I have many more avenues to speak to them.
David, so you are really the man who drives the BrandZ report globally and in India. Give me a sense as to what are the big changes that you see, in terms of how brands are valued, how they're trusted, over the years. Do you see a significant difference at all, or is it the same? And B, if you could juxtapose the Indian market vis-a-vis the rest of the world and see, highlight the key differences, if at all, that would be nice.
I'll try and do some of that. I think, first of all, the fundamentals, I agree with everybody, that you can't have a good brand, and you certainly can't have a valuable brand unless it's trusted. How you earn your trust, I think, is the thing that really has changed. If you go back in time, the reason that banks built those massive, great big buildings was because scale and bigness equals trust. Today, trust is about not scale. It's about how you deliver your brand promise to your individual consumer. If you deliver that promise every single time, on every single occasion, you earn trust. The difficulty for brand builders today and for brands today is the way in which the consumer interacts with you is so variant, and the journey the customer takes is so different for each customer, that being able to do that on every single occasion, on every single touch point, is a monumental task in its own right, but it still has to be done. What I would say about the change is, whilst I think having trust is essential, you now need another ingredient. And I think we've seen around the world, the brands that are increasing their value at a faster rate not only have trust, but have another important component part, and that is recommendation. And I think what we're seeing is recommendation is also a forward-looking metric. You can be a very, very trusted brand and have very poor recommendation, and that doesn't bode well for what's going to go on in the future. And that's more and more important in a socially networked world, where more and more we are looking at reviews and we're looking at what other peer groups talk about. And if they recommend a brand through good usage and good experience, we're much more likely to buy into that brand and use it. So I would say, looking forward, the new combination of metrics that we should all be looking for is fantastic trust, fantastic recommendation. Both of those result happiness.
We've had several cases of mega brands suffering a bit of a setback, be it the recent case of, let's say, Maggie a couple of years ago, or let's say a decade ago or so with Cadbury, facing some kind of a crisis with having worms found in their chocolate for the benefit of the ones who don't know here, and they've all managed to bounce back. So it's not like the customers are that unforgiving. I think if there is a mistake that is made, customers are more than willing to forgive if enough action is taken.
The investment you make in the brand to gain customers' trust, to gain their understanding, to have a relationship with them, not only helps you in the good times, but probably much more important, helps you when your brand's under pressure. And if you do have a crisis of any description, if you have lots of brand equity in the bank, you can draw on that, which will help you through those times.
And also, I think if I can just supplement that, I think, everybody makes mistake. Everybody goes wrong sometime or the other. The important thing is, what do you do in the wake of that? Are you trying to brush it under the carpet? Or are you sincere, genuine, you recognize your mistake before the whole world has come and forced it upon you, and you show a certain sincerity and commitment to change for the better? If you do that, people are forgiving, the whole society is forgiving. But if you don't do that, and if you try and act clever and cute, and if you think that you're going to just weather the storm by doing clever stuff, I think that's going to hound you very badly.
The stronger the brand, the easier it is actually. Because if I know as a brand, what my North Star is, what am I really here for, and what am I trying to achieve, I get the confidence from that to actually say, here, I went wrong here, I diverted from the North Star, and I'll get back.
How would you define, loyalty today, for instance, has also gone through a bit of a metamorphosis. So loyalty in the previous generations versus loyalty my generation and forward, there is a big difference in the way we understand that term. And loyalty is no more looked at in some generations as a good thing. And loyalty in the previous generations was the thing. So loyalty for brands has also undergone a big change in the way people look at you and consume you. Would you say that, your life as heads of companies has significantly changed as you try and target younger TGs vis-a-vis older TGs?
It's also important to remember that when we go back in time, a lot of the packaged goods markets, when we talked about loyalty, it wasn't that people were buying the same brand 100% of the time. Most brands are bought relatively infrequently. Even for the strongest brands, people will buy that brand maybe 5 out of 10 occasions, 6 out of 10 occasions. So there's always been a repertoire to the way that people have bought packaged goods. And I think what we're seeing now is that repertoire extending into other categories as well. So if you think about banking, or if you think about insurance, or if you think about cars, or if you think about tobacco, if you think about entertainment, people are much more willing to mix up the brands that they're buying and to buy the brands that they want for particular needs and for particular occasions. So the task becomes not, can I get my brand in front of the consumer every single time? It's, how can I have a portfolio which appeals to different needs, and how can I hope that they buy from my company as much as possible? But people are fickle, and they will choose across brands, across companies, depending on the need they've got.
Right.
Yeah, I think, in my perspective, I think there are two important things which are changing and ever changing. And one is that the information flow has become much more democratic. Everybody has access to information. And the second thing is that you have a lot more choice. So on one side you have far more access to information, the other side you have a lot more choice. So it's very important that, and particularly in the context of younger audiences who consume that much more information at much faster pace, I think authenticity becomes that much more important. You cannot live by the past. You have to be continuously relevant, and you have to give newer and newer reasons for them to be loyal to your brands within the purview of the values that created trust in the first place. But you have to be consistent, but you have to be innovative at the same time.
Even though there is much more choice, there are many more avenues and touch points through which you can get people to be more loyal to you. That is one. Second is because...
could you expand on that?
So for example, now, given that it's not only there is brand speak that matters, but also what other people say about your brand. And many people can say something about your brand. It can
Where
be
you
out
have
there.
absolutely no control.
Where you have absolutely
Yeah.
no control. So it goes back to, of course, your brand has to be authentic and the experience has to be
sure.
good, etc.
All of that, yeah.
But in the past, even if you were all that, loyalty was tenuous. Now, if you are all that, actually there is an opportunity for you to gain loyalty much more, because the number of touch points that your brand has to interact with people and people have to interact with your brand has increased.
But Sandeep, let's say what you're saying is true, right? So let's say out of the 10 people who've had great experiences and have had, firstly, not everybody who has a great experience talks about it.
Yeah.
It's only if you have a bad experience you'd like to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
That's how we are.
Yeah.
So the point is, isn't it today a lot more difficult to actually amalgamate the good experiences, because the bad experiences are so much more exaggerated on platforms where you have no control?
Yeah, so let me come to that. I think there are two aspects to this. One is an aspect where you know that there are some people who are having a bad experience and they have a place and a voice to voice that to you, and you get that authentically and directly from them. That's a fantastic feedback for me as a brand to do something about, which earlier it used to take me maybe years or months or weeks of research to understand what could be wrong with my brand or why are there not enough people who are loyal to me. Now I know, so I can do something about it.
That people are looking at loyalty in relation to loyalty cards. How can my card drive loyalty? Which, it's completely. It's completely the reverse way around. I think if you want unconditional loyalty, best thing is to do go out and buy a pet dog. That will give you unconditional loyalty. But if it's a consumer, it's a much more complicated thing than that.
I want to talk a little bit about the pressure on corporations. So yesterday, for instance, there was metaphorically speaking yesterday, the growth pressure wasn't as much as, let's say, today, because let's say the average tenure of a CEO, not talking about the CEOs here, but generally, is about 4 to 5 years. The average tenure of a CMO is even lesser. So given that, the pressures on the top management is a lot more, and hence I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that most growth plans are short-term growth plans because a turnaround is required, which of course impacts strategy and hence reputation of the organizations from a short-term, medium, and a long-term point of view.
Yeah, I think so. It goes back to the values of the organization. That's really, really important. If the company is built on the value of I want quarter-on-quarter street expectations have to be met, then you will find that there are certain amounts of.
The new joke is it is quarter se quarter tak, and that's how all corporations are currently functioning because of the pressure.
When we look back at this period of financial history, when maybe someone will do a PhD on it, the advent of quarterly reporting, I think, will be shown as one of the catalysts for poor business making and poor long-term performance. Being concentrated, we're all on boards of companies in this life, in previous lives, where I think we will probably admit in private that we've made decisions that were great for the quarter but not good for the year and not good for the long term. And I think somehow we need to redress that balance from a corporate finance reporting perspective before we can balance the two together.
It depends on what kind of a relationship you've established with your customer. In this case, the customer is the market.
Sure.
If your relationship is so transactional that I promise you 20% growth next quarter and this is what I deliver, then the moment you are at 19.5%, you have failed me. But if your relationship is deeper, more nuanced and more organic, then everybody understands. How do you explain that today? I completely agree with David. There is nothing more destructive and distractional than the quarterly results. I mean, it's totally insane. However, in the same insane world of quarterly results, there are companies who do not deliver any profit, and their stock and their market cap is just going through the roof, because they have convinced their stakeholders that they have a larger purpose for existence. The day that larger purpose of existence comes under question, they would come crashing down. So I think it depends on what's the larger purpose or the sum total of purpose of your existence. If it is just to deliver me 20% growth, then you better deliver 20% growth. If it is more than that, then there is then it's a very different equation.
I just like an outside-in perspective. So really, both the gentlemen on the extremes. If you'll have met a lot of clients during your India trip. You've also, in your previous trips, had a lot of conversation with clients, Indian clients. You've also looked, deeply and delved into the BrandZ report. What is your reading of, let's say, the Indian market and its current corporate psyche versus the rest of the world and actually other emerging markets?
I mean, I think we all have a tendency to be self-critical about our own country. And so from outside in, I would say that India has got a really healthy and vibrant brand economy. I mean, we see the brands in India having grown more in value than in China or globally. If we compare the strength of brands in India compared to the UK or Spain or France, they're stronger brands here than they are in those markets.
Why is that? I mean, expand on that. Is it because, like the Chinese, we love brands, or are we brand neutral?
I think
why do we have stronger brands here?
Well, I think, as I say, we all have a tendency to be self-critical about what we know best in our own countries. And I think you've got great brand marketers, you've got great marketing services agencies, a lot of creativity. I've seen a lot of, we were talking about innovation. There's a lot of innovation that we see in India around things like packaging and pack sizes. It's not the area that you would think is the sexiest area in the world, but actually delivering value to a consumer, you can do it through everything, all of those types of things. So I think it's a very healthy environment. And of course, there's things that you look at India and you say, well, other countries do it better. But I think it's worth just stepping back and saying, actually, compared to most countries in the world, India has got a very healthy approach to branding and marketing and executes pretty well.
I think to add to that, clearly countries are brands in their own rights.
Absolutely.
And we've recently launched a study called the Best Country Study at Davos this year, where we looked at brands, countries as brands, and India is actually a very strong country brand. And I'm not trying to make a political point because I don't know the politics well enough to do it, but Prime Minister Modi, I think, has made a very big difference outside of India to the perceptions of India. India is seen more now as a vibrant economy. It's seen more as not the easiest place to do business, but certainly easier than it has been to do business, with the long term looking even better. This year in our study, for the very first time, we actually looked at the perceptions of country leaders. Now, some of the country leaders were seen very poorly. You can guess which one was seen the most poor. Well, I think Trump is probably the most polarizing leader in the world, so he scores very poorly. But Modi scores very, very well. He's very much on the positive side of the scale, as well as, when we did it this year as well, we looked at business leaders around the world. There are a number of high-ranking Indian business leaders that are also seen as world-class business leaders. So and the number one brand in this year's ranking, HDFC, we are explaining to our clients and marketeers around the world what a fantastic job they've done in the financial services sector. There isn't a financial service brand in the world that performs so well in terms of consumer preference than HDFC. So sometimes you look at your own country and you think it's not as good as anywhere else.
Fair enough. Explain to me then, I get your point, and also India is a very difficult and complex market compared to, let's say, a more homogeneous market such as other countries are. But given that, explain to me, why is it that only one Indian brand has actually made it to your global list, which is HDFC, which made the cut 3 years ago? Why is it that no other brand has been able to make the cut?
Well, I think when you look at brand values, we're looking at two things that make up brand values. One is the economic contribution. So how big is the brand in terms of its actual size and the number of crores of revenue that it represents? The other one is the brand contribution. So what's the relationship between consumers and that brand? In terms of the relationship between the consumers and the brand, we've got lots of Indian brands that would rank amongst the top 100 or 200 brands in the world. What we haven't got is stock market valuations and revenues which compare with a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook or an Alibaba or others. But that will come over time. It's not to do with the inherent strength of the brand, it's more the financial side of things. And what we're measuring here is the value of the brand, not just how strong a brand it is in the eyes of its customers.
And we're beginning to see some Indian brands sort of popping up, you know, in the top 10 most valuable global car brands. Maruti Suzuki this year managed to just nip in. So I think it's the 5th year. I think if we all come back together in our 10th year, we'll see many more Indian brands in the global. But I think it's also actually it's a wake-up call to many Indian companies and organisations. You know, it's a big world out there, and actually India can take a much more assertive position in the world stage. There's no reason why Indian brands can't be big global brands.
But on that note, thank you so much, gentlemen. This was truly insightful. I'm glad we got some serious, nuggets of insights, and hopefully people who watch this have learned a lot more, and we'll see better brands emerging from India. Thank you so much.
Thank you.